Lucifer, the devil, the adversary, one of the most entertaining and genuinely threatening characters in Supernatural. Goes from a dark, manipulative force of nature to, well, this. So what happened? How does a character who once carried entire arcs on presence alone end up feeling like a shadow of his former self? That's the question. The answer is not as simple. It isn't quick, and it doesn't start where most people think it does. Lucifer doesn't fall apart in season 13 or season 14. He starts breaking in season 11. Season 11 stands out for a reason. After the original 5-season arc, it's one of the few that brings things back to something that feels complete. Real stakes, a real looming threat, a sense of things to genuinely end. Amara is released. The darkness itself, death is, well, dead. Chuck has returned and is revealed as God. Everything escalates to a point where even Lucifer wants in. And that's important because Lucifer isn't entering this as the same character we saw in season 5. Time has passed, circumstances have changed, but more importantly, he hasn't really been forced to reevaluate anything yet. To understand why season 11 matters, you have to go back to what Lucifer is at his core. He's the brightest of the angels. Not the firstborn, that's Michael, but the favored. The one placed ahead of the others. The golden child. And that position comes with something that defines him more than anything else. Pride. Not just arrogance, but his identity to him. His sense of self is tied to being right, being chosen, being above. So when humanity was created and he's told to bow, it's not because of an order that he decides to go against it. It's a contradiction of everything that he believes himself to be. And that's where the mark comes in. Because the mark doesn't create pride or any of the negative emotions, it amplifies them. It pushes it further than it should go. It turns something fundamental into something corrosive. And from there, everything else just follows. The rebellion, the fall, the creation of demons, the cage, and then nothing changes. And that's the key. Lucifer's spent millennia locked in the cage, but he doesn't grow. He doesn't reflect. Instead, he stews. Everything he believed at the moment of his fall just sits there, unchallenged and, frankly enough, actually reinforced over time. So when he comes back into the story, he's operating on a worldview that hasn't been tested in a very long time. But season 11 is what tests it. The last time we see Lucifer before season 11 is season 7, but that isn't really him. It's a projection, a hallucination born from Sam's time in hell, a reflection of damage, not the actual character. Season 11 is the first time we're dealing with Lucifer as he is again. Immediately, he's doing what he's always done, manipulating, adapting, working within the situation he's in. Why? Because the cage was damaged, which allowed him to reach out, a hand clawing towards the surface until reaching Sam, the one person he knows he could actually manipulate. He got on his side, and one person he needs due to being his true vessel. He doesn't say that it is him. Instead, Lucifer convinces Sam that it is God, wanting Lucifer to be freed in order to fight against the darkness. And it almost worked. It shows that Lucifer hasn't lost his edge. He's still capable of reading people, still capable of adjusting his approach, but when it fails, he shifts from manipulation to coercion. And this is where something subtle starts to show. Lucifer can break bodies, but he struggles to break will in the way he expects to. The Winchesters don't respond the way others might, and that forces him to pivot again, which leads to Castiel. Now, on the surface, it looks like a mistake. Castiel says yes to Lucifer, but when you actually look at the context, it actually makes more sense. The angels are afraid, not just cautious, afraid. They're dealing with something that they don't understand, something that they only heard about in fragments and stories, all-powerful, all-consuming, unable to be destroyed. The darkness isn't just a threat to the angels, it's an unknowable one, except for what they've been told, that the darkness will consume everything and wants revenge. And fear like that changes decision making. Lucifer understands that. More importantly, he has something no one else has. Experience when it comes to the darkness. He's seen her. He's fought her. Whether he frames it honestly or not doesn't matter at that point. He does have credibility. And Castiel, operating on incomplete information, a very real sense of urgency, buys into it. So Lucifer gets what he needs. A vessel, freedom, and access to power. And again, he still isn't broken yet. He's still himself himself. Even in how he handles hell, you can see it. Things aren't the same as they were before. Crowley's influence has shifted the structure. Less brutal force, more strategy, more politics, which is pretty bad. Yeah, we can all do without politics, to be fair. Lucifer adjusts to that. He leans into the organization. Up to this point, Lucifer is still Lucifer. Maybe a bit more flexible, maybe forced to think differently, but not fundamentally changed. That comes later. The shift doesn't really happen because Lucifer loses to Amara. It happens because of what happens after. Because for the first time in a very long time, Lucifer is forced into a situation he doesn't control. He can't reframe and he can't avoid. He has to face Chuck. And when that happens, something that's been sitting untouched for millennia suddenly isn't so stable anymore. The anger is still there. That doesn't go away. You see it immediately in how he stands, how he speaks, how he looks. But it's not the only thing. There's hesitation now. There's something held back. Because this isn't just God to Lucifer, this is his father. No matter how much time has passed, no matter resentment has built up, that connection doesn't just disappear, it just got buried. So when they finally stand in the same place again, Lucifer isn't reacting as the devil. He's reacting as both son and the devil. And that creates an instability in itself. You can hear it in his voice. It's not as controlled as it used to be. Not as absolute. There's fluctuations there. It seems almost as if he doesn't fully know how to approach this. Like there's something that he never actually prepared for. Then Chuck heals him. And instead of resolving anything, it just complicates things. Because from Lucifer's perspective, it isn't a gesture of care, it's a decision made for him again. So whatever openness might have been there starts to close, but not entirely. And that's why the conversation that follows matters so much as it does. It's millennia, a built-up perspective, colliding in real time. Lucifer still holding on to his justification, still framing himself as the one who was wrong. And Chuck doesn't dismantle that directly. He shifts it. He asks a single question. What would you have done about you? And that changes the entire angle of the conversation. Because Lucifer isn't being asked to defend what he did. Instead, he's being asked to step outside of himself and look back at himself as the problem. And he can't answer it. Not because he refuses to, but because there really isn't an answer, really. And that's where something starts to give. Because Lucifer's entire framework depends on the idea that there was a better outcome, that Chuck made the wrong choice, that there had to have been another path that could have been taken. But if he can't define that path, even in hindsight, even when the focus is entirely on himself, then what does that leave him with? It doesn't make everything okay. It doesn't suddenly justify what happened to him. It introduces doubt in a place where there wasn't any before. And that doubt isn't resolved. It just sits there. It stays. After Amara removes Lucifer from Castiel and leaves with Chuck, Lucifer is left behind again. And this time, things don't hold together the same way. Because now he's operating with that doubt sitting underneath everything else. And instead of addressing it, he does what he always does. He deflects. He tries to assert control. He chases power, relevance, validation, anything that puts him back in a position where he doesn't have to sit with what that conversation brought up. And that's where the instability starts to become more visible. The vessel hopping, the need for recognition, the push to becoming God. It's all built on the idea that if he can just prove himself, then everything else will fall back into place. But it doesn't. And even when he takes over heaven, even when he sits upon the throne, there's no foundation beneath it. And that becomes clear the moment he actually experiences what that role entails, when he hears prayers. And almost immediately he can't handle it. Because he's not weak. It's because he fundamentally misunderstood what that responsibility meant. The weight of it, the constant demand, the scale of it. It's not something you can just step into because you think you deserve it.
You took the job, Bruce, so I suggest you get to it.
Seeing him smile would make me so happy.
Prayers, okay, prayers. This creepy whisper thing has to end. Organization and management. That's what I need. Need a system, something concrete. Concentrate. Files. Let all prayers be organized into files.
Instead of adapting, instead of growing into it, he rejects it outright. He calls them whiners and dismisses it and moves on, which says more than anything else could, because it shows that despite everything, despite the doubt, despite the conversation with Chuck, he could never actually change in the way that would have mattered. Even becoming a father follows the same pattern. It becomes another way to prove something, rather than something he genuinely understands how to be, and that's why it falls apart. Lucifer's decline isn't a sudden drop, it's a slow fraction of who he is. Season 11 doesn't break him outright, but it introduces something he can't reconcile. It forces him into a perspective that he never had to deal with. And instead of resolving it, he builds everything on top of that fracture. And over time, it shows. Because at his core, Lucifer hasn't really changed. As Chuck says, this was always there. The mark didn't create the negative feelings. It didn't create his pride, his envy, or anything. It just amplified it. It pushed it further. But Lucifer wants love. He wants recognition. He wants to matter. But he approaches all those through pride, through control, through the need to be right. And those things don't lead to where he thinks they do. So by the time you get to season 14, what you're seeing isn't a different character. It's the same one, just without the stability he used to hold himself together and the justification that he was wronged.